Well, welcome back to another episode of Theology, where I've got my copy of the Confession. And after the last two episodes, I'm sure you're all breathing a huge sigh of relief that I actually have tea today, not soda and not coffee. Which, by the way, despite the lack of appropriate beverage, big thanks to the Reverend Josh Rieger out in Hexham for doing our last episode of Theology. It's great to just get a bit of a tour of our denomination through these episodes. Oh, and also a shout out to one of my youngest fans, a friend of mine, who describes me as the guy who loves coffee and has curly hair. So I have been described in worse ways. But actually, this is not coffee. This is generally tea. So, but anyway, that brings us today to the end of chapter 6 of the Confession. And this section has been on the fall of mankind, the sin and the punishment. And we really end section 6 on a bleak note. One of those things that if it was the last part of the confession, it would be nothing but bad news. But the good news is that this is not the end of the confession. This is the diagnosis, and we'll be getting soon to the solution, the antidote, if you will, to this. So section 6 of chapter 6. Every sin, both original and actual, being a transgression of the righteous law of God, and contrary thereunto, does, in its own nature, bring guilt upon the sinner, whereby he is bound over to the wrath of God, and cursed of the law, and so made subject to death, with all miseries, spiritual, temporal, and eternal. And so again, this ends definitely on a very bleak note. And what it is getting at is that the sin that we inherit from Adam, we're guilty of that. And the actual sin that we commit, we're guilty of that as well, that these are breaking of God's law, and that then that subjects us to all the curses of the law, to death, and to ultimately eternal punishment, which what the confession ends on here in section 6. And so it really is bleak news. It is bad news. The reason the confession puts it in here is that it's true news. That we are broken, that we are sinful, that we justly deserve God's wrath. I mean, if you find me a person who is actually perfect, right, we would say that at some level they just do not understand their own nature, their own self. Because we all know that we are not perfect. We are not as good as we could be. We're not as loving as we could be. We're not as kind as we could be. We're just frankly not perfect. We sin. We are disobedient, and we are selfish creatures. And so the confession just brings that to light here. And I got a message on my phone. Okay, sorry for that interruption. There's a lot of planning for Zoom Utopia 2, which is happening tomorrow night. If you haven't signed up, head over to our page, Gospel Reformation UK. But anyway, my tea is now cold. That's okay. I just want to wrap this section up, which it does state that without an outside intervention, without the Spirit working in our hearts, without Christ coming to die for us, we would be left in this state of sin, rebellion, disobedience. But praise be to God that He didn't leave us, that He didn't leave us to our just deserts, to what we deserve, but has sought to come. Jesus has come into this world in order to save sinners. And that's the heart of the gospel, but it does indeed start with the bad news, which the confession brings up. So thanks for tuning in again. Sorry about that interruption. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow. God bless.